Now, an in-depth look at the news and information shaping our community. This is Moose Talks with your host, Doug Craig, on Moose FM.
Welcome to the show. A little later on, we're going to be catching up with Energeticcity.ca investigative reporter Spencer Hall on his latest article on property crime in the North Peace. We've seen lots of discussions about that online, and Spencer dug into that a little more, so we're looking forward to chatting with him about that. But first, the Fort St. John Flight Basketball is hosting a tournament starting today featuring teams from all over the Peace, I think, and beyond. So to chat a bit about the club itself and also the tournament, we're joined now by Fort St. John Flight Basketball Vice President Desirae Bedell. Desirae, welcome to Moose Talks.
Hi, thanks for having us.
You're very welcome. As I understand it, you've been in this kind of from the start. You were there as one of the...
I was a parent back in the day.
So tell us a bit of, if you can, a bit of the history of Fort St. John Flight and you know, why it started and where it came from.
I don't really know the deep history.
Sure.
I do know that it kind of started up in about 2012. I wasn't involved right at the beginning, but I'm going to say around 2014, 2015, my oldest played. So I was a flight mom for about 4 years, and then he graduated, and then COVID hit, and so it kind of lulled.
Yeah.
The executive was great, the old executive. They ran a really good club. It was a competitive league. And when they were ready to just let the bird fly, we stepped up. So this is not a new club, but it's a new to us club.
I see.
So our executive is 3 main members. It's myself, Jesselyn, and Tara. And we're just a group of moms that wanted to have the availability of basketball for our kids.
Yeah, because I guess before that, you know, kids could play with their school teams, correct? But that's a limited season every year.
And I believe the program was only for roughly grades 7 to 12 at that time. It was just a competitive league for the older athletes. So when we came into it, like I said, I do have an older kids, but I also have a couple younger kids.
Yeah.
And our president has quite a few younger kids as well. So we wanted a program that could grow with our children and something that was available to the younger groups as well. So that's where the development league kind of came into play, which is grades 4 to 6. And we've had really great success with that so far.
I see. So the development side of it is kind of for the younger kids, and then the older kids get more competitive, I suppose.
We actually have like 4 tiers of competitiveness.
Okay.
We do our U17 and U15s competitive. They go on 5 tournaments, and they have assessments and try out. And then we have our intro to competitive, which is our U13s. So they still go to tournaments, but it's cut it back to about 3.
Yeah.
And then we have our development, which is grades 4 to 6. And then we also just recently took over, or was given the opportunity to be a part of the Spring League basketball in Fort St. John. So we will be also running a Spring League program.
Very cool.
Yeah.
What, you know, and I'm sure people who play sports kind of understand the difference between development and competitive. Can you kind of tell those of us who maybe don't exactly, you know, what the difference is? I mean, other than, of course, the age of the kids, what kind of changes when you grow into kind of the older tiers where now you're maybe, I assume, worried more about the score and your stats in the game and how you're contributing to the team as a whole, I suppose, eh?
Well, our development really focuses on the fundamentals and the basics. And the grades 4 is when elementary schools can start playing competitive sports. So that's a really good opportunity for them because they come out of it in the end of January, I guess, and then our spring league starts up for April. And so they come out, they've had some experience, they really like the sport, but it just brings it back a little bit to where we're doing shot form and dribbling techniques and rules and terminology, and it helps build those athletes up so that when they do get to the competitive level or the semi-competitive level, they have an understanding of what the game's about and they really have a passion for it by that point. And it's really a great opportunity. We've even heard from school coaches that they're like, wow, this is great, these kids are coming to us and they have experience and they have understanding and they really want to play. That being said, we still openly accept new athletes at all levels, and we're there to give an opportunity to the youth in the Peace to play basketball.
Yeah, because as I understand it, I was speaking to Jesselyn, the president, about this. Kind of the school league, it's kind of like essentially winter, so they'll play January to March or April or something like that. This has made it so kids can kind of play basketball basically all year round.
We're really rooting for an all-year basketball program,
Yeah.
Of course, with gym availability and coaching volunteers, which is a huge portion of our club. This was our first year, just this last school year, basically. We had our fall league for our 7 to 12s, and it kind of gave them 8 weeks of prep before school basketball started. So that was in late September, October, into November. And then school ball hit up. So then they were playing that. And just as we were coming out of school basketball, we did our winter league for the 4 to 6. So they came out with excitement. They wanted to play 8-week program. It was really, we would do a practice on Tuesdays, game days on Thursdays. It was great. Everyone kind of just got divided and split up. So there was no real teams. Coaches just came in and that was your coach for the day.
I see.
It was a really great opportunity to learn people's skills, to play with different teammates, to have different coaching. And then when we run into our U12 development now, they're split into teams, they have their coach, and it's a lot more fundamentally based, but they still get that 2 practices and game days. So it's just their own little league that they play together, and it's been really successful so far, and we've had really great feedback.
So at the competitive level then, is it is it honed down a lot more then? So that's just one team that then goes to tournaments, or is it still there's enough kids that you can kind of scrimmage and
we don't like to say no. So we basically, if we have enough coaches and we have enough interest, we'll do our best to run as many teams. So I think our U15 actually has 3 teams.
Okay.
Is it U15, maybe U13s? But we have, and they're tiered differently based on skills. They've had evaluations and stuff. And so that when we're going to tournaments, we're not playing our own teams.
Yeah.
So that way we've got the silver, the bronze, the gold divisions.
I see.
Right now we haven't really had a lot of scrimmage time between the teams, but then we've got connections with Dawson and Grand Prairie, and they kind of would be interested in coming for exhibition games and stuff and playing together. Another great thing about that is that our U17s and our U15s will coach and ref our younger kids. So it really brings community back. It gives the older kids an idea of what it's like to be a ref, because you don't always agree with what they have to say, but now you kind of have the shoe on the other foot and you get an opportunity to be like, that's what they call, So it's a really great community sport. Surprisingly, a lot of the older kids are signing up for reffing, and it's been really great just to keep the love of the sport alive. And the parents, if you guys want to volunteer, we have practice plans made up. You don't need any experience. You just come in, support your children, support the club, and have a good time.
So if you don't really even know much about basketball, there's volunteer positions.
Yeah, there's positions all over, especially in the development league. And we find that a lot of the parents stepping up are just parents, and they just we have Brad, Jocelyn's husband. He does a great job with practice plans, and that way when they're coming out of it, they're all getting the same information. You're not going to have a more experienced coach have a better team or whatever. Like, everyone's learning the same thing, and it's really great to just bring it back down to that level and still enjoy the sport.
Where are these athletes kind of coming from? I obviously Fort St. John, but do you have some people kind of coming in from kind of the local towns nearby to play along? Do you have a wide catchment area, I suppose?
Mostly just the Fort St. John and surrounding areas, just for our teams in general. But we do have all the teams coming for the tournament, which is really exciting.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about that. Just a sec. I did want to make sure we talked about this. You've mentioned it a couple times, though. The earliest you can sort of start playing, I think you said kind of grade 4 is when it starts, say. If parents listening right now, I mean, it's a Pro D day. They're probably top of mind is, what do I do to keep my kids busy? And they're interested in getting involved in this. How can they do that? When do you accept kind of new athletes, that kind of stuff?
Well, with our year-running program, every couple of months we are opening up to having the more development side of it. Competitive teams are already built. And that they've actually already went on their first tournament. But otherwise, just every couple of months, if you reach out to the Facebook page or keep an eye on the Facebook group, I'm the social media manager, so I would be the one you're speaking to. And I just post pretty regularly on when we're starting tryouts or when we're opening registrations and that. So that's our main focal point. You can always reach out by email if you needed a direct question, but Facebook is pretty much the easiest for a quick response.
Yeah. Do you know offhand kind of when the next time you'll be opening things up again is?
Well, Spring League registration closes today. So if you have anyone between grades 7 to 12, that
very
will be,
last minute.
This is our last day. Otherwise, it won't be probably until the fall.
Okay. All right, and then the kind of the best way, as you said, follow you guys on Facebook is kind of where they're in for you.
And there is an FSJ Hoops program. A couple of our coaches actually run that, and that's kind of more of like the summer drop-in and throughout the school year. So there's also a Facebook page for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And then again, we have the Spring League program, which is really exciting. So we kind of just have all of our basketball in Fort St. John under kind of one umbrella, where we have our connections for that. So it's really for any age group from grades 4 to 12.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about, I think it's called the Northern Hoops Classic. The tournament, I don't know if it started already, but it starts today and goes through.
Starts at 1.
Till Sunday. Tell us a bit about that.
It's not the first Northern Hoops, but again, it is our first Northern Hoops as an executive. And we did bring on a committee to help with that because there's so much that goes into it behind what you see.
Yeah.
And we're just really lucky. We have 43 teams coming to the Peace region.
It's amazing.
So yeah, it's really great. Our club has 17 teams total. We have 9 competitive. So it's really great that Fairview and Peace River and Grand Prairie and Dawson Creek, they're all coming together. And so it's really exciting. We have tournaments starting at 1 today and going till as late as 5, I think, on Sunday. So it's going to be a busy weekend of basketball.
Yeah, and I think I saw it's kind of, I guess, mainly at North Peace Secondary School.
Yeah.
But also at Burt Bowes and Margaret Murray,
yeah.
too. Okay. Is that split up between age groups, or is it kind of random where people are changing?
Not really. It's kind of a mix of everybody.
Yeah, okay.
We do have a lot more focus on today and tomorrow will be mainly the boys, and then Saturday and Sunday for girls. And that was just to kind of better accommodate our traveling teams so that they could pick their night, basically. Other than that, it's all different age groups, all different times, and we're excited.
That brings up another question. I know I'm going backwards now, but you mentioned boys and girls. You got separate teams?
Yes,
okay.
We have a lot more boys teams, but we are getting in there with our girls. We have 2 competitive girl teams, a U15 and U17, and then 7 competitive boy teams. Yeah.
Okay. Very cool.
And then the youngers, the U13 is also split boy and girl, and then the U12 is mixed.
Okay.
And Spring League is kind of mixed as well.
To come to the basketball games, there is kind of a bit of an admission price. I think you said they're taking non-perishable food items from the Women's Resource Society, which is very cool. If you don't have that, you could also just get $5 at the door, which is also going to the Women's Resource Society.
I think just the donations is going to the Women's Resource,
gotcha, okay.
and then we are doing 50-50 draws and gift baskets and stuff like that to kind of raise funds for the club to buy equipment.
Gotcha.
Yeah, score clocks, basketballs. You wouldn't know how much a basketball costs.
And is there a schedule of kind of when all the games are available on the Facebook page?
I believe they actually have their own Facebook page. So if you look
Gotcha.
up the Northern Hoops Classic Facebook page, there should be a schedule. I think they're going to try to do some live feeds of some of the games. I don't know if they're going to be able to get all of them on there, but we'll definitely be posting about them. And there should be a schedule posted.
Wonderful. Well, Desirae, I really appreciate you taking a few minutes to chat with us about this day. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having us, and go watch some basketball.
Absolutely. That's Desirae Bedell, the Vice President of the Fort St. John Flight Basketball. We'll be right back to talk with Spencer Hall all about property crime in northern BC right after this. Welcome back to the show. Now we're going to talk about really a topic that's evergreen. It certainly has come up a lot lately on local Facebook pages and whatnot, and that is property crime. So our investigative reporter, Spencer Hall over at Energeticcity.ca, decided to delve into it with his latest article that came out recently. Spencer, welcome back to Moose Talks.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be on the other side of the glass.
Thanks so much for being here. If you can, tell us a bit about, kind of in general terms, your article on property crime. I think it was Fort St. John and sort of the North Piece, eh?
So Fort St. John was included just because we live here.
Yeah.
And there's always posts on social media talking about property crime. But, I found through my investigation that Fort St. John is actually kind of returning to a historical level of property crime because it went down during the COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
And that's because we were all stuck in our houses.
So it is going up, but to kind of the level.
So Fort
like
St. John, yes.
Yeah.
Dawson Creek, however, is seeing a significant rise. And, we kind of, it's difficult because I wasn't able to get the perspective of the Dawson Creek RCMP just because I imagine they're very busy.
Yeah.
With Dawson Creek and Fort St. John, and because we're so close to the Alberta border, there's actually a lot of trans-jurisdictional property crime that happens. So
wow.
So there's repeat offenders, and they're a very small percentile of who's committing these crimes, but they create a bulk of it. Like we're talking about, 85 to 90% roughly.
Wow.
So
by that you mean somebody causes a crime in Grand Prairie, in Dawson Creek, in Fort St. John, in Goodlow, and Clearview, like all over the place.
They're moving about, yes.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of one thing that I was able to kind of uncover. I mean, it's been talked about a lot, obviously. And they have been fairly successful in capturing and actually holding these people who are committing these crimes, because the big issue right now is because of COVID and not wanting to overcrowd prisons, it was actually kind of easier to get bail. So that is a huge issue now, and you see it all the time with RCMP releases. They were released on conditions or whatever, which isn't unusual, but when it's a repeat offenders, I heard that a lot of RCMP officers and, of course, members of the community are getting frustrated because, with the RCMP, they put in all this work and then, an hour later, the person's back on the street doing the exact same thing.
Yeah. Wow. I wondered if there was a part of this, and you kind of spoke to it already, the perception of more crime. Maybe we're hearing about it more suddenly, and especially because we're hearing about it more, people are more apt to bring up their stories of it happening to them. And as you said, Fort St. John, at least, is kind of returning to the level it was at, which, is still not good, but it's nonetheless not like we're seeing an enormous spike that is unheard of before, right? So how much of this do you think is sometimes perception when we look at social media and people discussing it, that it maybe seems worse than it might be? Were you able to talk to RCMP about that or find out anything in that regard about the perception of crime really kind of spiking in this?
Yeah, so, one of the first things that I do when I do an investigation is I take a hypothesis. So this one, crime is up. I can't prove that crime is up out of the gate. So if I had started this investigation saying crime is up, I don't have the facts to back that up. Yeah. So my first question that I looked into during the investigation is, is crime up? Yeah. And, talking to the head of the Fort St. John detachment, he's like, if there's one thing you can take away from this interview is that, yes, crime is, kind of going up. But, Fort St. John, we're not sure why, has historically had a higher level of property crime. So, the perception, and I also think, with social media, it's easy to, you see things, the algorithm is kind of designed to see things that you will react to. Usually that's not positive things. So I think that there was a perception that it is higher in Fort St. John. In Dawson Creek, it absolutely is higher. And I think that folks from Fort St. John will sometimes see that and be like, oh, well, yes, I did this. So, kind of looking, what we did was we took the property crime statistics, which the RCMP have to report to the Stats Canada every year. And we took a 10-year spread and we looked at it and we were like, is it higher right now? It is higher, but it's not as high as, say, it was in 2019. So, it's really kind of making sure that you check your hypothesis before you kind of go into, well, why? So we need to make sure first, is it higher? Yes, it is. Why? Or no, it's not. Then why are people feeling this way? So I think that, it's great that we have so much, social media is great to communicate, and we were able to find out because of social media that, crime is up in Dawson Creek. Of course, there were also groups that were meeting with the mayor and stuff like that. So that tipped us off as well. But, really making sure that this is happening for sure before we kind of launch into the next thing. And I think with perception too, I mean, if I say, oh, I was, my place was hit last night, and then you're like, oh yeah, well, someone else, I know somebody else whose place was hit, then your confirmation bias, you're going to be more aware of property crime because you've heard it, so I think that plays into it as well.
Wow. From the RCMP, were you able to garner any, here's what we're doing, here's what we're trying to do, here's what we're preparing for if this continues to go up? Were they able to offer any kind of real answers on that regard? Because I know the budget for our detachment is going up. There was something recently from the city about how they're shouldering all of it, and they expect it to be a part of the, the process of planning that with the federal government. But anyway, is that to cover off some of this that when crime went down during COVID, that now we're seeing more to maybe make it easier for RCMP officers to do their work and maybe prevent some of this from happening?
So yes and no. In speaking with the Fort St. John detachment commander, he told me that they don't have a dedicated crime reduction unit. However, they do have officers, and he said he's been able to leverage officers from other detachments like Dawson Creek, and I think they have one that they're working with in Alberta, because again, there's that trans-jurisdictional line. Yeah. So they have a kind of like a unit where they're working with that, and that through that they were actually able to, I think, nab 2 prolific offenders, and once they did that, they said that they saw a massive decrease in the amount of crime that's being committed. So again, it's that small group of people, and people like to think that it's the people who are maybe struggling with housing that it is doing this, but I'd argue that usually when you're houseless, you don't really have the resources. So it is actually a small group of criminals that are doing this. This is how they make money. They don't go to work like 9 to 5. That's what they're doing. They're taking copper piping out of the walls, and that's how they're doing it.
Wow. So essentially RCMP is working now to nab this small group that's doing, as you said, about 90% of all the property crime, working with these other jurisdictions to make that happen because they keep crossing the border to do so.
Yeah, and there's challenges there again, like I mentioned with bail. So one of the things that was kind of brought up during my investigation was that there needs to be kind of bail reform. And another thing too was that it's not just our area in BC that is seeing this rise in property crime, and actually throughout Canada they're seeing rises of crime. So for example, Manitoba is seeing a lot of offenses being with using bear spray in a violent way. Ontario is seeing a rise in gun violence. So I think a lot of it is I think with property crime, it's how people make money. I think other times you're seeing unrest because of what we've just been through in the last few years. I don't know if you heard there was a giant pandemic. But so I think that's really kind of what we're seeing. But I think that that reform really needs to go in, and that's going to stop us from seeing, the same folks on the street an hour after they've been arrested.
Wow, fascinating as per usual. All right, well, you can read the article now that Spencer wrote over at Energeticcity.ca. It's under the news tab and under Investigative. And your next article is sort of going to be related to this, as I understand. We're not there yet, but you tell us a bit about that if you can. If you're allowed.
I don't know if I'm allowed to, but
Okay.
no, there's we're trying to kind of connect with the groups that are, not necessarily RCMP affiliated. I know there's one group that works, kind of in tandem with the RCMP, but they're trying to kind of bring down the level of, they're essentially trying to be very aware. So that's pretty much all I can say about it. But you'll be able to read about it hopefully next month.
Definitely more to say on crime in the North Peace. So check out the article now. Again, Energeticcity.ca under the news tab and under Investigative. And we'll have more on this from future investigative articles from Energeticcity.ca's investigative reporter, Spencer Hall. Spencer, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me.
My thanks to our guests, Desirae Bedell and Spencer Hall, for joining us today. Make sure you check out the podcast version of the show and other excellent Energeticcity.ca podcasts over at energeticcity.ca/podcast. You can also listen to them anytime with the 100.1 Moose FM app, which is 100.1% free for you to download from the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. Well, that's the show for today. Jordan Prentice and Trey Lopushinsky are the producers of Moose Talks, and I'm Dub Craig. Be well.